Okoth, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you again. Today's topic is very interesting. The only problem that I'm fearing that my power is low, but it's a very interesting topic that if we go deeper into it, like you have just mentioned something, because me, I believe in somebody. When you are going to these things, we must hold things with the horse. Hold a cow by its horn. You know, like for example, you've said about you've talked about certain companies that I've just was hearing from afar about there's certain companies. So we need to do a power analysis. Power. You need to do power analysis because we don't talk about state power. State capture. Is it that the state is capturing corporate world, or is it the corporate world that's capturing the state? Those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Because, for example, here in Kenya, it is the corporate world that have captured the state. So the question that you want to ask ourselves also, in Uganda, is it the state that has captured the corporate world, or is it the corporate world has captured the state? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Because what I know with the government, the way, if you understand the way state craft operates, government don't do business because already, even I know Uganda is now becoming a capitalist. Yeah, good. Am I clear?
You're not clear. We are hearing echoes. You're not clear.
No, other people will have to unmute.
Yeah, all right. Go on. You're clear.
Yeah. So I was talking about uh, that because somebody has talked about state capture. For example, here in Kenya, it is the corporate that has captured the state, not the state that has captured the other way around. So we need also, when we are doing this power analysis, we need to understand, for example, Uganda, is it that the state has captured the corporate world, or is it the corporate world that has captured the state? Because the way I can understand, if you look Museveni very clearly, Museveni is not his own person. There's some people who have kept him in power. People have kept him in power at the corporate world. And let us be very clear in these things. We should not beat about the bush. It's the corporate world that are keeping Museveni in power. Is it that people want some, I was told about a story that there are some companies that, I don't know, they're doing a oil exploration and exploitation in some parts of Uganda. Have you done a power analysis? Which are these companies? What are the directors of these companies? Because Uganda currently, there's a lot of natural resources. Have you really understand what are these companies that are doing oil exploration or natural resources? Have you done that kind of power analysis? Those are the companies that are keeping Museveni in power. So when we're discussing these things, sometimes let us be just candid enough. Let us just be candid enough. Sometimes when we're just talking as abstract, people will not understand it. Let's take, for example, this Uganda currently. There's a lot of oil, I don't know, natural exploration and exploitation. Have we done research, or we want to call it social research, on which companies have been given this tender? Have we done such kind of research? Which companies have been given this tender and what kind of product are they producing? Those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Because if we don't ask ourselves, because it's part of economic non-cooperation, because we need to name and shame these companies, because those are the companies that are feeding the monster. Museveni is surviving through this corporate. Museveni doesn't care about small businesses. Because there was a time that I was in Uganda, Museveni just Museveni can just give freedom of. He doesn't even care whether you are selling a potato in near parliament, but he's giving freedom of these small businesses to make you happy that Museveni is a very good person to do a small business. But the vision of Museveni is very different from the vision that we have. So we need to identify these companies that are keeping Museveni. These companies that are, and I've been very careful. I've been very consistent about the issue of Dutch-owned companies, these flower farm companies that are along Entebbe Road. We need to identify them, because how can such companies survive in a regime that oppresses people? Ask yourself, how can such kind of companies survive in a regime that oppresses people? 12 good companies, Dutch-owned, and survives in a country, surviving since Museveni took over in 1986. Companies that are still surviving. Furthermore, there are still more companies coming to do exploration and exploitation of natural resources. These are the things that you need to identify. Like, for example, I think most of you, if you have read, there's an activist who was in Nigeria called Ken Saro-Wiwa. Ken Saro-Wiwa was very specific about economic non-cooperation. But, some people, because it's a system that says that he was doing his activism violently, but he was very choosy. And he said this oil company, Shell company, he just talked about Shell company. Shell company is the problem in Nigeria. If you have read about the story of Ken Saro-Wiwa, it was about Shell company among the Ogoni people in Nigeria. So when you are doing economic and cooperation, and I really encourage you people that we should not be abstract. Let us identify those companies. And identifying those companies, we need to unmask them. We need to know the owners, the what, and you know the truth about them. So we should also learn from persons like Ken Saro-Wiwa. Ken Saro-Wiwa, when he started about economic and cooperation, he didn't beat about the book. He talked about Shell company that was doing oil exploration and exploitation among his local community of Ogoni people. So when you are doing this economic and cooperation, that's the reason why I'm saying that we should do a thorough power analysis. Because, for example, like last week I talked about Kenyans are really trying, not cooperating with the bank like Equity. Those are banks for elite. So what do we do about those things? Women every Saturday, like tomorrow, they limit to do what's called something like table banking, something like table banking or merry-go-round, where money does not go to this system that oppresses them. When money goes to the bank, when money goes to the bank, you are feeding the monster. So money just goes around among the people. You see, when people are not banking, people refuses to banking. Banking is not everything. It does not mean that when you are not banking, you are a poor person. The most important thing, like I've been telling Kenyans, when you have a roof on your head, when your children are eating, when your children are going to these public schools, what are you looking for again? Is it that you have a certain amount of money, and people are keeping money in the banks, a lot of money in the banks? Those are the same people who are feeding the oppressor. You see, those are the people. Money should be moving around the people. So every time that you are using an ATM machine, you're just feeding the same people. So I think the best way now is start now to do a power analysis and to come with those pillars. We have to be specific at times. To be specific and identify. Like I've identified you for sure that these Dutch oil companies are the ones that are keeping Museveni, because they are still living under a very rogue regime, and they are surviving. What makes them survive? Because they are feeding the ogre, they are feeding the monster. So we need to identify also which other corporate are feeding the monster. So we need to be very careful, not even very careful, to identify them, so that when you are coming up to this in advocacy, like I can give you that example of Ken Saro-Wiwa. He was very specific. When you are coming about it, because of what they are doing in Ogoni people, he was very specific. It's the Shell company that are the oppressor, that are feeding there's no difference between Sani Abacha. And I'll encourage people to read what happens between Sani Abacha and Ken Saro-Wiwa. It's that Ken Saro-Wiwa went to the people and told them the importance of economic non-cooperation. That Ogoni people should not cooperate with the Shell company. You should not work with that company. You should not buy anything from that company. And it was a very successful campaign. So in this issue of economic non-cooperation, let us also learn from what happened in Nigeria. Because in Nigeria during Sani Abacha, I think Abacha was more a very bad dictator even than Museveni. But Ken Saro-Wiwa, because he came up with a common narrative, he came up with everything about what to call in the movement mindset. So people knew that the common narrative, it was about that it is Shell. Shell is the one that is feeding Sani Abacha, a dictator in Nigeria. Thank you. Unless there's another question.
Thank you so much. I'm seeing other speakers are coming in. But shortly about what you've been talking about, I'm propelled to think that really in Uganda we know these companies. For example, media, they are media companies. We know that these are state sponsored, sorts of like NBS, Bukede, actually the Vision Group, the whole of it. These are state sponsored. But what we want to draw is the connection between the ordinary person down there. That may be the worker for us, we the activists or the organizers, to gather this information and disseminate it down there. But of recently in Uganda, we had a huddle, they stay home where a certain group was organized to rally people to stay home in protest of the high prices. But you would find that some communities would respond, other communities wouldn't respond. I think that was a gap in knowledge where someone asks, but when I stay home, or when I join this cause, how do I benefit? And how does it address my problem? And you would find at the end of the day, some people going to work normally, other places they responded positively, which later lost the morale. So we want to know, okay, if we have established these companies because we know them. For example, the media companies, the Vision Group, they are state propagandists, they drive state narratives. Everyone knows that. How do we use the buying power of the ordinary people to use it to bite the oppressor at the end of the day? That is where our interest is, these pillars of power. So how do we really attack them that at the end of the day, the oppressor can feel the pinch? Because if we are able to do that, then at the end of the day, as we organize, we must be in a position to explain to the people how this relates to the cause we are telling them. Most of the times we have come up with actions, but you find the ordinary people who may not have that big knowledge about this, but when they are finding it difficult to draw a connection between the actions we are staging and their grievance, seeking the redress of those grievances. Yeah, so can you throw more light about that? Then we have other speakers to hear from them their views.
You see, there's something that even I speak the last time about having a common narrative. Because, for example, I also give an example of Kenya because that's where this is where I live and I do my activism. There's something that we have to connect with the people. You know, there is some narrative. It should be narratives that people can connect with. For example, the media that they've talked about. You've talked about media that is being state-owned media. So we should encourage what we call citizen journalism. You know, those media that we're talking about, they're not alpha and omega. You see, because now we have reached a certain age, we've reached a certain era where people are not fools. People are not fools. The world has really opened up. You know, the world has really opened up. So when the world has opened up, it's not necessary that we depend on state media and such kind of things, so that where we can get information and we can get such kind of things. So we need to have what's called citizen journalism, where we can be expressing ourselves, where people can be expressing themselves. You know, so when you say that things like Bukede is a tool that's being used by the state. No, those things can be because nowadays even in Kenya, we don't read much of newspapers. We especially after this election was done, you know, people have just put off their TV. Like you might say, me since election was done in Kenya, by the way, for sure, since election was done, I've never opened the TV. I've never opened the TV. My TV is just blank like that. So, well, in one way or another, I'm doing what's called also it's an uncooperation. So I'm not. You know, those companies depend on if you are watching, if you are reading, and if you are buying. And also some advertisers. If advertisers realize that a certain newspaper do not have enough readers, they'll not advertise. So it's upon us now to have to get being empowered and know that when we're being lied to, you know, propaganda in the Australian Wellness University, you know, propaganda is a unit by itself, the university. That is a history by itself. So with the time, as time goes by, people start to know the truth, where the truth is. And this one will start by having a citizen journalism, having a good Facebook group that people talk about things, you know, a WhatsApp group, how we are sharing our information, you know. We should not depend on a state-owned or state control. So we should come up with a way of citizen journalism, and also come with, you know, with one way of our propaganda, one way of our propaganda. You know, we should not be to depend on we should not be socially controlled. You know, it's very wrong to be socially controlled. You know, that when mainstream media says something that is the gospel truth, and people have been taking as if it is the gospel truth. So we need also to change on our way of organizing. So if we change of organizing, you know, it can be a little bit easier. It can be easier. So on issue of media, we need to have those what to call alternative media. We need to be bloggers. Like myself, I'm a blogger. You know, when this, you know, and by blogging, things move very fast. You know, state on media is still very traditional. They are doing things very traditional. So we must be like thieves. You know, a thief is always at upper hand than the police. So we should be also like a thief. We always be to be ahead of the police. So we should try as much as possible to be ahead of what the government is doing, because they like when we are disintegrated and them that are organized. You know, they like us when we're disintegrated, and only, you know, a rogue regime survive when people are disintegrated. But when people are one, the government really fears. It really fears a lot. So it's the way we are organizing ourselves, continuous community organizing. You know, community organizing is not an event like the time. It is a process, and the process takes so long time. So with this one, what I still encourage more and more, there are some corporates that keep Museveni in power, and as a movement, we need also to start unmasking them, and unmasking slowly, but so that people can understand. You see, this company that was given what do you call it? I don't know whether it's tender to exploit and explore natural resources in northern Uganda. It's the same company that killed the people that are killing people in Mozambique. It's the same companies that are doing these things, horrific things in other countries. So that's one way. So we need to identify those companies and tell the people. You see, the company that is doing all exploration and such kind of thing in our land. These are the same companies that is doing horrible things in Darfur. These are the same companies that are doing things because they're changing their names. So as activists, we need to be ahead of them. When a company comes in Uganda, it's upon us now. It's upon us as activists to identify who are sometimes they call them. Is it called amalgamation of company? You know, so when they come, they can come with a different company. They come with a different name. They did their human rights violations in such a country, so they don't want to use that name there. When they come here, they're using a different name. So we should be sort of like we should be ahead of those companies. So what's the most important is right to information. A company is coming to Uganda, is being registered. We need to know their shareholders. Maybe there are some local shareholders and international shareholders. So we need to look at how much does somebody. There's a person who is here because I don't know whether about Uganda. In Kenya, when a foreigner comes, there must be a certain percentage of shares in that company that must be for the locals. So we need to know who are the locals who have those companies and who brought those companies and where did that company come from and in that country that it came from. And that's the reason why there's importance of having solidarity with other activists in other countries. That's what you call cross-pollination. We get information from other activists from other countries. That this company that is coming in your country and the company that was doing this, it was doing this, It was the strong environment. They was doing this. So when they're coming to your country, they're coming up with a different name. So we need to do what we call cross-pollination. So when a company has come to Kenya and has been doing some violation and such kind of things, when it comes to Uganda, they're calling themselves an investor and they're coming with a different name. So we need to identify the same thing. I don't know whether it's happening in Uganda. You realize that there's some Kenyans. They always go to China. They register a company in China. So when they come here, you think that they are Chinese companies. So when people are being oppressed, you are blaming the Chinese. You're not blaming the you don't even care about who are the local shareholders of these Chinese companies. So we need to identify those things, because if you realize, even in Uganda, those Chinese companies that are doing construction, shareholders are Ugandans. They're just going to China, they register a company and come back here, and they come back to Uganda with a different name. Then when those Chinese who are just the mere workers oppressing people, you are saying they're Chinese. They are not Chinese. They are just but the same government that oppressing the people. So we need to have this what we call cross-pollination, and we need to know these companies. Let us be doing research and to know companies, who are the owners of the companies, shareholders, and kind of things. Because what I know with Uganda is being kept by the corporate world. It's corporate world that is keeping Uganda. Because every time it comes, these terms they always you get that we need investors in our country. You need investors in our country. That kind of terms, it looks very easy, but you look at what kind of investors are coming. What kind of investors are coming into Uganda, and what kind of business will they be doing? Because those companies, they'll come here, they want security, they want everything. So when the regime is oppressing people, it will be done. They'll also be continuing feeding the regime. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I believe you have really thrown much light regarding the corporates and the way how they exist and the way how they continue to influence the dictators or the oppressors grip onto power. And you bring it to light the task which we have to do and the way how we go about the task. I thank you so much. I saw G. Viola, he had something to share with us. You will share briefly, then we shall hear from Karonde.
No, thank you very much. It's Viola, pronounced as Viola that side, but it has to be Viola. Thank you so much. It's the first time for me to be present as well as to participate in this discussion. I was looking at the title whereby it's Breaking of Uganda's Pillars of Oppression by Economic Noncooperation. So it gave me some interest to say economic noncooperation. If we as activists embark on economic noncooperation, are we not trying to impede the possibility of, giving access to various social amenities to the people of Uganda? For instance, if that is achieved, you're looking at issues of taxation. Now, if you say we don't need to pay taxes, you tell people of Uganda to stop paying taxes or not to contribute anything like toll gates and all that, I think that will also plunge the economy of Uganda into turmoil, because that will also establish a leeway for the suffering of Ugandans. And whilst on there, I also had something to share to look at how President Yoweri Museveni Kaguta has been there since 1986. It's because probably of how he's been handling the people of Uganda in the localities as compared to the people in the cities. You also probably share with me that the previous election, you looked at how Bob Wine tried to envisage his, through way into State House, but then it never happened, just because he had all that euphoria within the cities, but came elections, the results were so disappointing. Of course, an election is characterized with the different aspirations. People come up with different outcomes of the same, talking about this and that, how it was rigged and stuff like that. But looking at the background of how elections have been carried in Uganda, you would find that because of the connection, the interpersonal relations that are there between President Yoweri Museveni and the people of Uganda, that also has given him an edge over any other candidate during elections. So looking at all that, I feel that the people of Uganda have great liking, great love for their leader. But those in the maybe 10, 15, 20% living in the cities do not like the leadership of President Museveni. So when we activists embark on economic non-cooperation, it means 80% of Ugandans would be suffering because medication in hospitals and any other like educational facilities, learning and teaching materials, and very important amenities would not be provided through taxation in Uganda. So I felt that I need to contribute on this one to make sure that we also understand. I'm talking about Uganda. I haven't lived in Uganda, but I've just been following and reading issues happening in Uganda. But it's the same even in the African countries of Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and the rest. You find that if leaders have a great interest in the local people, the people that matter, then it becomes a challenge for these leaders to be ousted of power. How bad they might be perceived by the elite class like us here, but you find that they're still maintained in power because they have that interconnection between themselves and the very poor people, very farming people on the grassroots. So I feel that there could have been a better methodology of making sure that there is an end, maybe a halt to whatever oppression that is coming from leaders in Africa, because Kaguta, yes, has been overliving, but we still have others that haven't lived for so long. But people are already tired of them. They don't want them to keep leading because of their styles of leadership, as well as how they have been torturing the grassroots. So I think that's briefly what I wanted to share, that we can also have a bigger picture on the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insight. I think having open spaces for discussion like this, it is very necessary, even with the people with the differing views. I think that is the country we want, where your view does not make you wrong. But why we are not discussing actually the problems of Uganda is that because there are very many. And what you have talked about, where that he cares much about the people in the localities vis-a-vis the people in the city. I want to bring it to your attention is that even the people down there in the localities and deep down the villages, they don't know that they are being oppressed. The people in the cities and in the towns are rising up because they are realizing that much of their rights are being violated. And there is no worry for the people of Uganda when we say that we should non-cooperate with them economically, non-cooperate with the state, because even the resources they obtain at the end of the day, they don't use them to benefit the people of Uganda. They used, for example, the taxpayers' money to construct to establish a hospital in Entebbe, Kajansi, Rubowa, something of that sort. But up to date, the money was approved, but the hospital is not there. When you try to look at the education facilities in the localities you are talking about, actually they are even worse than what is in the cities. The challenge is that the local people down there, they can easily succumb to the oppression and the repression. We have seen cases where they deploy military and they stop people from voting and the military takes over to vote. These are things which you are not able to see while you are in diaspora or outside Uganda, because the medias which we are having control their narrative. The news which you receive there, it is their news. So they choose what to publish out and not what to publish. So for us, we have no worry from non-cooperating with them economically, because even these monies, we don't benefit from them. You'll find that when you go to the hospitals, over 10 mothers die each and every day giving birth. So that is not the kind of Uganda we want. So we should not worry to non-cooperate with them economically. When the monies they get from our taxes, when the money they get from the resources of the country, they use them for their selfish interests. How would we have a ruler of the country who goes outside Uganda to build a school there when we are still lacking infrastructure in the country? So I think we are unapologetic when we speak about non-cooperating with the regime economically. Why are we saying so? The resources, the monies they obtain from the local people, they're the same monies they use to oppress them and to replace them. That when you talk about elections, where do they get the monies to pay the tear gas, to bring tear gas trucks, to deploy military, to feed the military on a daily basis? In the previous election, they hired the military from Angola to come in Uganda. All of these things, we saw them. So which monies are they using? So if they are using our money, we are saying no, they should not continue with such when they're using our money. They should not continue to oppress us when they're using our money. So many people are unable to get access to health care. So many people are unable to get access to education, but their sons and daughters study from abroad. Their sons and daughters, when they fall sick, even when their wives fall sick, they get flights and go get hospitalization from outside Uganda. So if they don't trust the systems they're giving us here, they have established here, and they're using our own money to go and get medication from abroad, what about the ordinary people? The people you're talking about in the villages, how do they get a chance to go maybe to Aga Khan in Nairobi to get a medication, to go to USA to get medication? So that's why we are saying that we should stop non-cooperating with them economically. If they feel really these countries theirs, let them use their own monies, but not to use our own money to oppress us. Yeah, so the fact is that the people outside have been misinformed, have been given wrong information because of what we are talking about today. Comrade Judy has talked about the alternative media. Those are the things we are talking about. The next media you people are watching from diaspora, the Vision group, their materials you're reading, all of these are their things. And they have censored the media to a level that if they don't want an article, you don't publish it. So meaning that all of what they want you to see, the people outside Uganda, that's what you will. But do you take time to listen from the ordinary people or the oppressed people like us? Because we are Ugandans too, the people who are here. And we are not concerned, we are unapologetic about non-cooperating with the regime economically. I wanted to emphasize that because at the end of the day, we don't want the same regime which we are giving our money, which is exploiting the ordinary people down there, to use the same money to oppress those people, even when they cannot offer the services, the basic services like education, health, even the shelter. So I wanted to emphasize that, and that's why we are keeping our eyes on the basic ways how those ordinary people can raise their voices. Those ordinary people, they don't have guns. Those ordinary people don't even have maybe any way access to justice to express themselves. So the only way how they can express themselves is through the non-violent means which we are talking about, because even when they go to the streets, the repression, they bring guns for people who are carrying placards, people who are carrying petitions to parliament, they bring guns, something of that sort. But we believe they have their own power, and that is the power of non-violence. So we want every individual in Uganda to use that power to reject this oppressive rule. And that's why we are trying to find ways as the people who are here. You've said all that long, why has it taken long? Because he has continued to hoodwink Ugandans for so long. If you are not hoodwinked to join him, then they find the best ways to suppress you. We have seen several people who have been abducted lately in this very week and this very month. So those are things not worthy to be celebrated. So that's why he has been able to manage to rule Uganda for all that period of time. It is not that people love him, but because he has silenced almost all decent voices. But we are saying no, every individual, they have their power and they should utilize that power. I'll move to the next speaker. Yes, Julius Karonde, you please share what you wanted to share with us.
Thank you so much, Freedom Movement. Thank you so much, Comrade Okot, Viola, and Comrade Auma. So whenever we talk about economic non-cooperation, it is very hard for somebody to just bump into it and understand. First of all, Comrade Viola should understand, okay, if I'm to tell him, initially we had a comprehensive discussion about the political non-cooperation, social and economic. And we discussed political intensively, and then we reached a conclusion that in Uganda we've done a lot of political non-cooperation and cooperation, and it has failed. And then we said, let us now look at economic non-cooperation as the next step. And I remember when we were discussing that, I quoted a certain activist. He was from Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania. He was called Saif Sharif Hamad. He contested to be the Zanzibar president in 2015. I was there. I was part of the observation team, and I covered a lot of Magufuli rallies, campaigns, and then also part of Zanzibar. So I saw a lot of what happened and how they got that transition. So one of the famous quotes I always quote from Saif Sharif Hamad, who was also an activist. Those who can, you go and read about him. He said that in Africa, dictators use 4 factors to remain in power or to cause oppression, whatever you call it. He said the first one is they use state funds. In our case, it is Bank of Uganda. URA collects the taxes and then sends them to Bank of Uganda, and then he uses that money to buy the Nobody Maos, to buy the opposition, to fund oppression, coercion, and so on. And then he said, like I said, state funds in an election, NRM can just tell all the voters, line up, and then they give each one 5,000, 2,000, 10,000. That is their manifesto. So state funds, all security agencies, we all know what happens in Western Uganda during elections. The military condones, cuts off the polling centers and tells everybody to go back. And then the military ticks all the ballot papers. That's why in Western Uganda, Museveni gets 100%, meaning even those who died, they resurrect, they vote for him, and then they go back to the grave. So the third factor is they use the Electoral Commission, and this one I saw it myself in Zanzibar. The opposition won by more than 200,000 votes. And then when Magufuli was declared the winner of Tanzania, he said, I'm from CCM, I cannot sit on the same table with the president of Zanzibar who is from the opposition. And now that election, and then have a rerun. So he ordered for a rerun, and it was done the following year, which the opposition boycotted, and CCM won by 98%. So here in Uganda, we saw it in Kayunga, we saw it in Teso, Soroti East, and it has been happening all over. The people vote for a different person. The Electoral Commission announces the candidate whom Museveni wants in that particular place. So we have the judiciary. In 2006, Justice Owinyi was Museveni's lawyer. And now in 2021, he's the Chief Justice. And he was doing, of course, he was defending Mr. Museveni in the Supreme Court. That's why the opposition even decided to withdraw the presidential petition from court. So never go for